All right. Okay, can you please introduce yourself? Tell us your name, the city you live and work in, your job description, how many years in the job, things like that.
Okay, my name is Fabio Bosco. I am a subway worker here in São Paulo. I am a member of the union. I'm a member also of a labor federation called CSP Kutas, and I'm also a member of a political organization called Unified Socialist Workers Party.
And you were recently fired. Can you tell us briefly about that?
Well, there was a strike 2 years ago, just before the World Cup, and the company decided to fire 42 workers. I was one of them, and we are fighting to rehire everyone.
Okay, very good. Can you just start by telling us a little bit about the city we're in now, Sao Paulo? How large is it? Where do you live?
Okay, São Paulo is a huge city. It has something like 10 million inhabitants, and if you take the whole area of Greater São Paulo, it's something around 19 million.
It's a big city. Can you tell us about public transportation in Sao Paulo? Can you also tell us, I understand that the buses were privatized. When was that privatized, and what happened? How did that affect workers and the riding public?
Yes, well, one of the big issues in São Paulo is public transportation, because there are plenty of people and not enough and affordable public transportation for all of us here. It bases itself on the bus, train, and subway. Buses were privatized in the early 90s. Before that, we had one main state-owned company called CMTC. It covers all the, let's say, low-profit lines, while the private sector were in charge of the lines that were much more profitable. So after privatization, what happened is that the quality of the transportation, both in quantity of buses, the time they operate, everything got worse. And for the workers, even worse.
Okay. There are many people who do not pay rent or own homes in Sao Paulo. However, there are many people who sleep in tents in the city. There are also perhaps over 100 buildings in downtown Sao Paulo which have been occupied by people without homes. In many United States cities, police would forcibly move these people. How has this developed, briefly?
Well, another big issue here in São Paulo and all big cities in Brazil is the issue of housing. And why? There are companies and rich individuals who benefit from keeping land and homes away from the people in order to have an increase of the prices of both land and other properties, and also rents skyrocket. So many people here live in very poor housing. We call them favelas. And here downtown, where we have many buildings that are empty, there are movements of homeless people that organize themselves, occupy these buildings, and start living there. The owners always resort to the courts in order to have a police action to carry out the eviction. But what happens? The Brazilian law establishes that there must be social use for land and homes. So there is a struggle there. In general, courts side with the owners, it's true, and then the police. Then there is a struggle against the police. Many times, depends on the political situation. It's the state cannot put the police to make the eviction. There are other times when this is politically possible. So at this moment, when we have many struggles in Brazil, we still have more than 100 buildings occupied in downtown São Paulo, and the struggle is on. You see, either they keep their places where they are living now, or the government build public housing and transfer there. That's the struggle of the homeless movement, which we support.
Right on. Can you talk to us a little bit about your union, the Metro Workers Union? How many workers are in your union, and what are some of the different functions or different work job descriptions that some of the members of your union do?
Okay, my union represents 9,500 workers that works for the state-owned Metropolitan Company of São Paulo. This company is responsible for 4 subway lines here in São Paulo. There is just one more which is private owned. The union fights to represent these workers, but up to now the bosses managed to establish a yellow union, a union that's linked to them, and so formally, legally, we don't represent the workers of this private line, but all other 4 lines, we represent all the workers. Who are these workers? There are train operators, people that work in the stations doing assistance to customers, all kind of assistance, maintenance, and also security. And the ones who organize everything, which are the guys who do the clerical work. So all these workers are represented by the union.
Okay, can you talk about how your union functions? About 6 years ago, I understand, the union leadership was won by worker revolutionists. What has changed in the structure of the union since then? How have decisions become more democratic, and how have workers become more active in their union?
Well, when there were elections 6 years ago, we had a new leadership in the union since then. And what was the improvements were basically related to workers' democracy. So, for instance, the number of mass meetings increased a lot. We have every month, we have at least one. When during every year we have struggle for a new contract, and so the mass meetings, we have more than one mass meeting per month during this period. This improvement means a lot. Means that the worker that is in his working place, he has the right to go to the mass meeting and to speak out his opinions on every issue regarding the functioning of the union and the struggles that the workers are organizing, are carrying out. So I think this is the biggest achievement. The bosses felt that the new leadership was a militant one, a leadership that believes in independence from the bosses, independence from the government, and in the action of the workers in order to keep all workers right and to have better wages and better working conditions. And what we saw during the last 6 years is that not only we had much more action coming from the workers, but also the contracts were able to have better wages in relation to inflation levels, And also a lot of struggles for working conditions were beneficial for the workers. So I think that this was a big achievement for the workers.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the Sao Paulo City train strike of 2014, which happened just before the World Cup soccer competition. What were some of the reasons workers decided to strike?
Well, we are fighting for a contract, for a new contract. We wanted to have better wages and some specific benefits. The company reached a point in the bargaining where it stops. And so, after many calls for a strike, the workers decided to go on strike. We had a strike, a 5-day strike. When we started the strike, the backlash coming from the company with the support of media and all governments, the state government, the national government where the Workers' Party was ruling in those days, were very strong against the strike. They tried to break the strike. For the first time, they sent riot police into the stations to carry out repression against the strikers, against the picket lines, and on top of that, they used the courts to declare the strike abusive, what opens the way for dismissals. The union got a fine, a very big fine that affected all the money of the union, and 42 of us were fired. Of these 42, 2 were immediately reinstalled, and 3 others we managed through the courts to bring them back. Now we are 37, and we won in the courts in the first level, the second level, and now our suit is going to the last level of labor courts, which we expect in 1 year or 2 we will decide the same of the other ones, which is to reinstall all of us.
And I'll just go out of order here, but how has the union supported you and the other 42, now 37 workers who were fired? Has the union done anything with you or for you?
The workers were very much in solidarity with us, and the union as well. So what happened? In order to keep us while we were fighting in the courts, a mass meeting was called, and the workers decided to make a special contribution every month in order to keep our pay. It's not the full pay, but it's nearly the full pay. So it makes it possible for us to survive while we struggle to be reinstalled. On top of that, there were public campaigns made by the workers. We bring the support from members of parliament, of social movements. We try to put this all together, and recently the union called an international meeting of transport workers against privatization, where the issue of the unfair dismissals were addressed, and there is a day of action that's called to fight back both privatization and unfair dismissals.
Tell us a little bit about the 5 days of the strike, because they were very eventful days. Things happened a lot at once. How was your union used to mobilize the working class to support the strike, the actual union office? Were you able to work with other unions and community organizations during the fight? Talk to us a little bit about not just the preparation, not just the aftermath, but the actual confrontation. Just a little bit.
Okay, first, during the strike, every day we had mass meetings where any issue related to the strike was addressed by the workers. We invited supporters from other unions, from social movements, to come to our mass meeting. they don't have the right to vote, but they would follow the debate and the decisions, and they helped us a lot during the strike. We also called the other labor federations to come to our meetings. Many of them come. So we were building links with other social movements, with other unions, with labor in general, in order to help us to win that struggle. And a victory is of one is always a victory for all, and a defeat for one is also a defeat for all. And what we feel is that many social movements and labor agree with us that that struggle was much of the interest of the whole working class.
Okay, I'm going to take a break. Okay, we're here in the offices of CSP Kutas with Fabio Bosco in Sao Paulo, Brazil. We're just starting this interview again. Fabio, if you can, we were just talking about the Sao Paulo City train strike of 2014, of which you're a member of the union and you participated in the strike. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences? Was there picket lines and how did that develop?
Well, during that strike we had picket lines both in the maintenance centers, but we also organized picket lines inside the stations that were the terminal where supervisors were replacing train operators and operating the trains. But what happened? We organized a group of strikers. We entered the stations and we talked to the supervisors. Then we convinced them not to operate the trains. The security body was on strike as well. So the company had to call the police, and then the police came. And when the police came, it was a riot police. For the first time they entered the subway stations here in São Paulo. When they gave the warning that they would attack in 10 minutes, the first time we decided to, after 8 or 9 minutes, we decided to leave. But another station where another group of strikers were in the picket line, the riot police attacked before the 10 minutes. And so it was hell because it was a subterranean station. Underground station. And well, tear gas, effect bombs, everything was there in the station. The station remained closed for the whole day. So we had this experience with the picket line, the picket lines. We believe that it was important for us to get to the workers that were not on strike. The broad majority were on strike, broad majority. But with some workers, it was possible to make it work small sections of the lines of the subway of São Paulo. So that was our experience with picket lines here.
Can you talk just on that issue? The union was talking about safety, that it was unsafe for the trains to be operated by these supervisors, and talk about why it was unsafe in terms of the maintenance and also because of the skills of the supervisors.
The point is that the supervisors had some training to operate the trains, but they don't do it on daily basis, not only on weekly basis or monthly basis. They never operate trains. And so what happens? It's definitely unsafe for the commuters to trains being operated by people that okay, they got some training, but they don't do it. They don't have the daily work that allows you to operate it properly. Well, the company knows that, and that's why they never operate the trains from the terminals where plenty of people use the subway here in São Paulo. So they just operate symbolically much smaller sections of the lines. So the trains were empty. The interval, the gap between one train and the other was much larger. But even so, we believe that the governor of São Paulo, when he gave orders to the trains to be operated, he was putting at risk all the commuters that were using the subway those days.
Okay. One of the things that the union was trying to do, as I understand it, was gain support from the public. Of course, the governor was too, in opposition to the workers. And one of the things that we have seen from afar is that your union called for opening the turnstiles, of having a free fare. Can you talk about that? Explain what the union was thinking and what ended up happening with it.
Well, when we were discussing to go on the strike, immediately the governor of São Paulo resorted to the courts to oblige us to operate the trains despite of the fact we would be on the strike. And so in the courts we proposed that okay, we operate the trains, but the fare would be free for all commuters of São Paulo while we were on strike, so that it would put pressure on the company to make the bargaining with us. And of course, we told the media about this, and we had an open letter that we delivered to commuters in the trains. And it was a popular issue, I can tell you, because commuters were definitely in favor of that. They would have the transport and they would not have to pay for it. So that was perfect for them. But the governor of São Paulo said that he would not allow that, and he did not. So we went on strike.
Well, one thing we didn't get to talk about a little bit is your job. You've been being what we might call in the United States a customer assistant. One thing, we have crowded trains, but I don't know if it's anywhere near as bad as here. Can you talk about some of the actual things that you do as a worker and some of the problems and concerns that you help the passengers with in your job, just briefly?
Well, we do everything in the station. We can sell tickets, we take care of the turnstiles. If someone is feeling bad inside the trains, we stop the trains, we take this person from inside, we provide primary care for them. If someone commits suicide, we need to go under the trains to pick up the remains. We do everything that happens in the station. The ones that are working there must do the job. That's it.
It's hard work. Okay, I want to switch topics to the Workers' Federation that your union is part of, FENAMETRO. Can you talk to workers in the United States about this? How does it work?
Well, here in Brazil, the labor system is based on local unions, okay? Differently from the US. In the US, you have national or international unions with locals that are subordinated to this national or international leadership body. Here, no, the power is with the local unions. And so what the local unions do is that they got together with others and they build federations. So the Federation of Subway Workers, Metro Workers, it gathers 8 unions across the country, and it's an independent, militant labor federation. That's it.
Okay, so you have been able to visit the United States. Can you explain some of the differences? Continue to explain some of the differences between how unions work in Brazil and the United States. For instance, in the United States, only about 10% of workers have a union, Most unions have an arrangement with the companies, the government, and the banks to automatically take union dues out of a worker's paycheck. How does that work in Brazil, and how do you win or convince workers to join the union and stay in the union?
Okay, something else which is different is that in the US, in the private sector, you have the closed shop. We don't have it like this in Brazil. In Brazil, it's like this. Every worker that has a regular hiring by a company, any company, he must have one union, one and only one union. So, but the affiliation to the union is not compulsory. So the worker decides if he affiliated or not to the union, he or she. So that's one difference. The level of affiliation here in Brazil is something around 30% of the workforce. They are affiliated to the union. Some unions have a much larger level of affiliation. For instance, the union I take part, which is the Subway Workers Union, in the operation and maintenance and security, we have a level of affiliation of 90%. But among clerks, something around 30%. It's much lower. Well, so that's one difference. The issue of having the dues discounted directly in the paycheck, in general, it's part of the contract. So the companies must do that. But sometimes, as part of a backlash against labor, they decided not to do it. So the unions must organize themselves in such a way to collect dues.
Okay, so I want to switch to the organization that we're here. We're in downtown Sao Paulo. We're in the headquarters of CSP Kutas. We have a few questions about that. So first, when was CSP Kutas formed?
Well, it was formed in 2003. It started as a coordination to fight back the pension reform of public employees that was being carried out by a new federal administration led by the Workers' Party. The president was Lula da Silva, who was and is the main labor leader in the history of Brazil. But his administration decided to carry out this pension reform. Federal public employees went on strike for 40 days, and the National Coordination of Struggles against this reform started there as a coordination, and later it became a labor federation.
Okay, so today, about how many unions and other organizations have delegates that represent workers as part of Kutas? About how many workers total are represented through these delegates?
Well, there are something around 200 organizations affiliated to CSP Kutas. 90% of them are labor, and 10% of them are other social movements like homeless movement, landless movement, movements for women's rights, black rights, gay rights, and student movement as well. So despite of the fact that the broad majority of this federation is labor, we also accept other social movements that fight for democratic rights or against oppression. There are 200 organizations affiliated to CSP Kutas, and if you put this all together, the membership of all these organizations, it will be something around 2 million people.
Very good. And you said that it formed out of the National Coordination of Struggles against the pension reforms, and so much of those organizations naturally joined in the beginning. Okay, can you talk about how Kutas is organized? So how does a new group or a group of individuals join? How do delegates get chosen or elected? how are decisions made? How often do you meet? What are some of the main goals? Some of those.
Okay. First, CSP Kutas is a militant labor and people's federation. It's independent from all bosses and all governments. Political parties, if a member is affiliated to a political party, there is no problem, but political parties have no representation inside the federation. What else? We had Congress every 2 years, and the national coordination meets every 2 months. This national coordination, every group, every organization that is affiliated to CSP Kutas, they elected people for both the Congress and the national coordination. So if, for instance, a union decides to join CSP Kutas today, it has the right immediately to send delegates 1, 2, 3, it all depends on the size of the organization, to the national coordination and delegates to the Congress.
Okay, so congresses happen about how frequently, and how frequently do national coordinating meetings occur?
Congress every 2 years, national coordination every 2 months.
Okay, and so let's talk about if a union does not vote in toto with its top leadership to join. If there is an opposition or opposition caucus to the union, could they participate, and how would that happen?
Yes, they can participate, and they take part in the election. Okay, they lose the election, so the proportion of the voting they got in the election is the same proportion of representation that we have regarding Kutas. So everyone is accepted, be a whole union or part of the leadership or an opposition caucus, all of them may affiliated to CSP Kutas, but when it's part of the leadership only or opposition caucus, they represent the proportion. They have a proportional representation to the voting they got in the elections.
Okay. Now you had said that students and other people's movements could participate, but the organization tries to have its focus on workers. Is there a bylaw or a structure that makes sure that this organization is centered on the working class?
Well, regarding the students, there is a limit that in the decision-making bodies, I mean the Congress, the National Coordination, you have a limit of 10% of student representation. So you cannot have more than that. We don't have, but just in case many student bodies decide to affiliate, all of them combined cannot be more than 10% that any decision-making body in the federation.
Okay, so one thing that will be new to a lot of American workers is one part of this organization, if you could explain, that you have an executive committee. You have some of the top leaders that do some of the work in between your bi-monthly or every 2-month meetings, but they are restricted. They have to do certain things and they cannot do others. Could you explain how that works and why? Why is it that workers have chosen this?
Well, we have frequent national coordination meetings to take the main decisions. So the executive body must carry out these decisions. Unless something sudden happens that you need to take a decision, the executive secretary must take a decision. They always try to leave all main decisions to the national coordination.
Okay. All right. We're just going to take a break. Okay, we're back in Sao Paulo, Brazil. We're in the main offices of CSP Kutas, the Militant Labor Federation. And we're talking to Fabio Basco, who's a rail worker. And we're going to start talking about some of the broader issues in Brazil. Many workers in the United States will be interested in what's going on here from a worker's perspective. Can we start with just some basic stuff? Many people don't know some of the basic things about Brazil, about how many people live here and what are some of the main industries in Brazil?
Brazil has something around 200 million inhabitants, and in terms of industry, we have everything: auto industry, chemistry industry, a very strong agribusiness, banking sector. So all business are present in the country.
Okay. There's a deep history for over 500 years, certainly, and then even before that for the native peoples. But can you talk a little bit about the recent history with the struggle against military dictatorships, and also the relationship between the workers' movements and the fight for democratic rights in Brazil?
Okay, the military carried out coup d'etat in 1964. And the resistance against them was carried out first by heroes, guerrilla groups that tried to overthrow the dictator. Unfortunately, they could not, because they were just groups separated from the mass movement that were trying to fight back. The army and the police, so many of them were killed, many of them went into exile. But in 1976-77, the student movement took the streets, fighting for democratic rights, for amnesty. And in 1978, the workers' movement took action. That was very important, and that was certainly the beginning of the end of the military dictatorship. The reason for the strike was essentially for wages. The oil crisis stopped what they call the Brazilian miracle in 1973, and so inflation was getting much higher. And so this strike in São Bernardo do Campo, near São Paulo, of the Scania workers played a very important role, and it was followed by many strikes. And so the military dictatorship started to die in those days. It really finished in the big campaign for democratic elections for the presidency in 1984, a huge wave of mobilizations. So that was the end of the military dictatorship. Something important happened in the end, which was the formation of new workers' organizations. One was a political party, the Workers' Party, and the other one was the Labor Federation, CUT, which is even now the largest one we have in Brazil. In those days, labor federations were outlawed, but even so, the militant new unionism that started in Brazil built the CUT.
Could you go a little bit further into that, so that much of what work is confusing to us in the United States and around the world about what's going on in Brazil comes from this period. So for instance, the political parties that are currently in power formed out of this moment. So could you take a little bit from the early to mid 80s about the formation of these parties and then their development over the last few decades?
Well, the Workers' Party, when it started, it was an independent Workers' Party. They had a revolutionary wing, which was a minority, and it put together the new labor movement, the student movement, and there was a very strong role of the progressive wing of the Catholic Church, people inspired by liberation theology. All these people together, they built the Workers' Party. But the Workers' Party, the stronger it got the more conservative it became. And so at the time when it was elected for the presidency of Brazil in 2002, it was already a very reformist party with connections, with links with big business in Brazil. So for big business, the Workers' Party did not represent any threat when it was elected for the presidency of Brazil.
Okay, so today in Brazil, there are perhaps over 1,000 strikes happening at this moment, right now, at the same time. What are some of the concerns of workers now?
Well, what happened here is that when this huge economic crisis that started in 2007, 2008, it had consequences here in Brazil in 2009, but they were not so deep. The deepest moment of economic crisis here in Brazil started in 1 or 2 years ago, when the Brazilian economy went into recession. So the GDP decreased 3.8%. Last year, for instance, we lost 1 million jobs. Inflation is around 10%, so the working class is losing purchase power. And all these conditions develop a kind of divorce between the working class and the Workers' Party, who was in the presidency of Brazil. And so this divorce meant that the ordinary worker was desperate to have jobs, to keep the power of their wages. They were fed up with the budget cuts in public education, public health care, and that's why they stopped their support for the president Dilma Rousseff, who is a leader of the Workers' Party. And so what happened? Curiously, despite of the fact that the working people were against the government, they want the government to leave. Among left-wing circles, the broad majority were in favor of, they stood for the permanence of Dilma Rousseff. So there was a contradiction here. If you are abroad and you talk with someone who is a left-winger, probably they will say that, okay, there was a coup d'etat in Brazil, but if you talk to an ordinary worker, they will tell you that they could not stand any longer the Workers' Party government, and they do not support the new government. That's what's happening here now. And the strikes, there are many workers' strikes and other social movements. They are fighting for survival. They are fighting for wages, for labor rights. That's the reason around all these struggles.
Okay, you are a longtime member of a communist organization. Can you briefly tell workers in the United States about your group and its international affiliation? What are some of the struggles your group has been able to participate in and lead?
Okay, I am a member of Unified Socialist Workers' Party. It's a Brazilian organization linked to an international organization called International Workers' League. And PSTU believes that the working class is the one who should have the power to bring about the necessary change we need in societies across the world. And in order to fight for workers' power, it's necessary to organize the working class with workers' democracy and also with an internationalist approach. I think we believe these are the tools necessary for the working class to to learn from their experience, from their struggle, and finally understand that the only real solution is when the workers take power and put away the big business that only benefits from the efforts of the working people.
Okay, would you like to say anything to workers in the United States and North America?
The history of the struggles, labor struggles in the US inspired all of us across the world. Many of the dates where we take the streets like May 1st, March 8th are days that are linked to struggles that happen in the United States. So we believe that the unity between the US working class, the Brazilian working class, and the working class across the world is the only possibility to offer a solution for the workers internationally. So my message is, okay, let's get together and let's change the world.
Right on. Thank you so much. Thank you for speaking to the workers in the United States.